Looking for something new in sci-fi or fantasy? Check out what Brandon Sanderson, Orson Scott Card, Nnedi Okorafor, and others chose as the best news stories of the year in the L. Ron Hubbard Presents Writers of the Future Anthology. From 24 award-winning authors and illustrators, plus art and writing tips and bonus stories. L. Ron Hubbard Presents Writers of the Future. Buy your copy at galaxypress.com, Amazon, or wherever books are sold.
It's time for you to get out and nominate your favorite podcasts. There's an amazing show I want you to consider for the People's Choice Podcast Awards, Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast, in 3 categories: education, storyteller drama, and art. For 4 years, the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast has provided advice and tips from international best-selling authors, world-class artists, contest judges and winners, and industry professionals based on the world-famous Writers of the Future contest created in 1983 by L. Ron Hubbard to help the aspiring writer and artist no matter their age. It is dedicated to the future of storytelling and art by showing that it is never too late to start, and those who make it are those who never give up. Go to podcastawards.com to nominate the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast in any or all of the 3 categories: education, storyteller drama, and art. That's podcastawards.com, and please take a moment and go out and vote now.
For 40 years, I've walked the line between worlds and am well versed in death. But I want to have faith in humans. For 40 years, I've walked the line between worlds and am well versed in death. But I want to have faith in humans. Give me something to believe in. Earth below me, sky above me, fire within me. Brought to you by UPRN Network. I'm Trish Moe, and this is The Missing Piece. Good evening, everyone. I am your host, Trish, and this is The Missing Piece. I know I'm semi-early tonight. It's a miracle. It is July 25th, 2023. We are broadcasting live out of New Orleans on 105.3 FM and United Public Radio Network. I am in the heartland, of course, as most of you know. And I do want to thank, before I forget again, Carnation for sponsoring my show and the network. And I'm super excited tonight to welcome a guest that we were just talking about. I was telling him most of my guests know, or most of my viewers and listeners know that I have guests on the show that I'm intuitively drawn to. And so, yes, there is a story behind this one as well, which he doesn't even know yet because it just happened to me this weekend, but we'll get to that. So I am excited to welcome Shawn Patrick Whittington, or also known as the Rev. He is an exorcist, seminarian, ghostbuster, lecturer, teacher of the paranormal studies and spiritual warfare. Shawn and his wife Sharon, who is a Stephen minister in the Lutheran Church and intuitive, are both survivors of extreme demonic attacks, and together have over 40 years in the field experience, that's a really long time to be dealing with demonic activity, actually. But they found and operate Ghost Be Gone. You can find that website on the ticker below. He will talk about that more, which is a spiritual warfare service based in Las Vegas, Nevada. And they assist with paranormal problems of various types and severities. He's also a cast member on Eli Roth Presents, the Legion of Exorcists, which I believe that first aired in June of 2023 on the Travel Channel, and Max, which I've seen a few of those shows now, and we'll get into that as well. It shares real life experiences of 6 exorcists, so that's exciting. He also hosts Rev Shawn Whittington's Paranormal Ministry, so you can catch that as well on YouTube. It's also a podcast, which is live on Facebook as well. So he's got a couple books you can find on his website: God, Ghosts, and Paranormal Ministry, a Supernatural and Spiritual Autobiography. And that one was released in 2019. It's a raw and truthful account of his experiences, as well as a second one, God, Ghosts, and the Paranormal Ministry 2, Chronicles of an American Exorcist. So be sure to check those out, and let me bring him on as well. Hi, Shawn.
Howdy.
Welcome to the Missing Piece. I'm so excited you're here. Thank you for joining me.
I wouldn't have missed it for the world. You know, I had we've already talked. You know that I had a rough evening and a rough morning,
Yes.
but I wouldn't miss this for the world. And I want to start by thanking you for something. I have never, in all the years I've been doing this, the podcast stuff, only since like 2015, had a radio show for a little bit and then the Facebook Live podcast. But I've never had anybody put together a promo reel like you did for me about a week ago announcing tonight's show. I thought that
Really?
was the most awesome um, thing that I'd ever seen. I thought that was so cool, and I had gotten nothing. As soon as I posted it and started sharing it, nothing but people reaching out to me. Did you do that? Who did that? That is so awesome. That looks so great. Actually, you watch it and you know that the person that put that together is just like oozing talent and creativity. So I just wanted you to know that I really appreciated that and just so awesome. And I may even get back to you and ask you what you might charge to put together just
So
one that I
it's
can use for my
funny you
show.
say that, because so you're actually the first person who's ever thanked me for that, for one,
Really?
because I have never I do graphic design, and I'm an artist and such as well. But graphic design really is my passion. It's what I wanted to do when I graduated high school, and I just recently got back into it in the last few years. And so I've done so much, and I've been designing logos and things like that for over 20 years. But as far as this, I'm just now getting into the animation and stuff like that, which I absolutely love. Um, but I've done it all for free for years now, and I'm like, and people are like, maybe you should, do that for
Yeah.
like a
You
business.
you
I
you
am.
if you tell me what you might charge to do something similar to that, that I can just like maybe play as a promo days leading up to one of my shows. I have a completely different opening and closing that my producer plays when I go live. But
Right,
something like that that I could use as a promo just for the show. Doesn't even have to mention a guest coming up, the guest I had that week or something.
right.
Let me know what you would charge for something like that, and we'll talk because that was awesome. That really was
Well,
awesome.
thank you.
One
I
person
appreciate that.
after another just reached out to me and said, "Wow, that's powerful. That was really whoever put that together." I said, "That's the host of the show I'm going to be on Tuesday night, Trish Mo. She did that. That's awesome. So thank you."
And a lot of, we were discussing that too. A lot of my even in anything to do with art is probably very, even when I make things for people, it's even more personal than I know, because it is based off of intuition as well, I'm sure, since I do everything off of that. So um I assume that that helps in this field. But I am super excited for you to be here. I watched a few of the episodes of the Legion of Exorcists, and then I also watched some of your podcasts. Obviously, um, I don't like to know a lot about my guests beforehand. Just as I wouldn't want to know a lot about locations I go to and stuff. It's the same thing. I like to hear it from the guests and kind of go. I guess that's what's different about my show. And some people are nervous about that because I don't have a script and I don't have like, I just ask what comes to mind. But one thing I will say, and we were talking about this as well, everybody on that show is very different. You were saying that you have friends of all different faiths and everything else. And typically I probably I don't really watch TV, so most things I wouldn't be interested in. But talk about how, well, first of all, the 40 years of experience, um, specifically in, I guess, exorcism or just in all walks of supernatural, paranormal.
Well, it's combined. I'm 63 years old now, and I was seeing spirit when I was very young. My wife is also a near-death experience survivor, and that happened to her also at a very young age. She came back from that experience very sensitive. She doesn't like to call herself a psychic, but she's invaluable when I take her on cases. I refer to her as my human dowsing rods. Um, but I don't take her out too much anymore because of a couple of severe demonic attacks that she, you know, was the recipient of. She shouldn't be here. They should have killed her.
Right.
But she's still here. And I've been seeing spirits since I was very, very young. So had my first up close and personal contact with a spirit probably when I was around 10 and actually helped that young girl cross over. And I didn't even really know what I was doing. But as far as the demonic goes, my wife and I did a little ghost busting when I was young. I spent a lot of years with that in the closet. I regret having done that now, but when I was young, riding around my Schwinn with the little, the little cage on the handlebars with my Polaroid in there and a little tape recorder and, riding around looking for spooky places to go in and ghost hunt. I didn't tell my friends I did that because I thought they would for sure think I was crazier than they already thought I was. And I wanted to have friends.
Yeah.
I regret having done that. But my wife and I have been married. We just celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary, and we were set up on a blind date. And we knew right away when we met each other that we had known each other in a past life, and we just hit it off. Knew we were both passionate about investigating the paranormal. But we did a lot of investigating, working cases, helping people, but didn't run into anything really, really dark till probably about uh, 6, 7 years ago when we went to a case and we didn't really know what we were doing. And I'm going to get hate mail for this, but we used a Ouija board there and I didn't know what I was doing. And that resulted in whatever was there at this place. We knew it was something violent was going on, but I had never really encountered that type of entity before. But whatever was there followed us home and took up residence in our house here for about 2 months. And I believe it was my misuse of the Ouija board allowed something to attach to us and follow us home. And that was a really, really ugly time. I didn't know what to do. I reached out into the paranormal community for help, and usually you never get any help.
Right.
For once, the paranormal community came through for me, and they introduced me to my then mentor, who now she's retired, but she's an ordained exorcist. She took me under her wing, and we fought this thing together and got it out of our house. And I was pretty much done with that. I was like, okay, this, I'm glad it's over, but I'm done. She saw something in me I didn't see in myself, and she said, I think you're being called to this, and I think you should consider continuing your training um, with me in the Exorcist Association that I'm a part of and the Christian University that I also teach through. Would you be interested in doing that? And I was scared, but I said yes because I wanted to be ready. If it ever happened again, I wanted to be ready. So I went ahead and I finished my training and became an ordained exorcism deliverance minister, advanced practice through that Christian university and this association of exorcists. And then since then, we've had a couple of other really dark cases that I've left the field a couple of times, like a year each time, about a year. I walked away from this field because I just got really beat up. My wife got beat up, almost
Right.
died. I got beat up a couple of times. One time, I think I must have died, and it was divine intervention that brought me back from this attack. But something always happens that lets me know I'm being called to this, and I need to just get back up on the horse, and that God still has my back, and He's got plans for me, and to keep doing it. So the rest the rest is history. I'm still doing it.
I know, especially in the collective, very recently, well, for the better part of the last few years, which I'm sure you've experienced as well with people you help and people in the spiritual community as well. But I've had numerous dreams about it and visions and such, that there are a lot of us who are meant to be in this field. I've fought this for a very long time myself, and I just happen upon these cases all the time, that I'm not even looking for, but that's how it works. But I've had these dreams and visions, and it's kind of a collective. Now we're starting to understand that most of the people that I know in this field have had at least one, if not numerous, near-death experiences, as well as and a lot of them directly being attributed to spiritual attacks, spiritual warfare, and what I keep hearing this entire year is, a lot of these things, it's almost like the matrix collapsing, right? And when that's happening, uh, it's almost like time released curses that are very, very old, which brings up very, very old entities as well, attack people and send these it's like a death spell, a death curse. So when you're doing things and they attack you in that manner, and it can take a person's life, as you know, obviously, um it's a huge setback. It's an energetic attack, but there's so much more going on kind of behind the scenes that people don't realize in the spiritual world, um, that I think needs to be brought to the forefront, that needs to be recognized, because that's not something, like you said, if you knew what you know now when you were a kid and seeing spirits, just like myself, and I think that about my kids, my life would have been a lot. um, I would have recognized a lot of those situations much, much sooner, and possibly not had to deal with, and I'm sure a lot of people are like that with the more negative energies in their life and things like that. Growing up when you're young and seeing spirits, that's a but it's interesting that you say that your wife and you both experience kind of those same attacks. And do you think, when you say you were this is what you were called to do, I guess. Do you think you have a choice?
You always have a choice. God gave us free will, and I always tell
Right,
people, uh, I feel like I got drug into this field, kicking and screaming.
right,
But what it has done was opened my eyes and made me realize that a lot of things that I just kind of brushed off when I was very young, I was being told then, and I just didn't realize it. I was being told then that this was going to happen, but I
right.
just brushed it off. My mother used to tell me, she would ask me, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I'm just a little kid. I said stupid things like, I want to be a fireman or a cop or a pro football player or Spider Man. And she goes, I think you should be a priest. And I would think that was just the I know now why she said that, but I used to think that was just the weirdest thing. And do you mind if I talk a little bit about my folks real quick, which will
No,
kind
of
of
course.
this will tie it all in, so you understand. My dad is a 25. Well, they're both in heaven. May they rest in peace, mom and dad. But he was a 25-year retired master chief radioman from the Navy. Served in World War II in Korea and stuff. Um, he got sunk on a ship out at sea, and they weren't
Wow.
supposed to have anybody come to help. There was so much like enemy activity in the area that all other naval ships in the area were told not to go back for survivors. So he was like floating around, hanging onto a piece of wood in the ocean for like 24 hours. But uh, one captain of one ship nearby decided to disregard orders and go back for survivors. So when this ship showed up in the morning, they thought the surviving sailors, and there weren't many of them, thought it was an enemy ship going to come and capture them or kill them while they were in the water or whatever. But when he realized the smoke fog cleared and saw there was another United States naval ship, they stopped and they were throwing life, the life preservers over and ropes and all that. He was so sick from bobbing up and down in the water and like ingesting whatever was on top of the water, probably oil and gasoline and God knows what else, that he was violently ill and he could barely hold on to this log, let alone swim and climb up on a ship. So he tried his best to get to the ship and he couldn't get there. And he finally heard them say, prepare to get underway. And he heard the engines kick over. Well, he decided they're going to drag me back dead, but they're not going to leave me here. And he found a rope laying in the water and he grabbed it and tied it all around himself. And he actually started to feel himself get pulled through the water. And he heard a voice say, there's one more over the side. And he recalled looking up and a big muscular sailor jumped over the side of the boat, hanging on with one arm, basically grabbed him by the scruff of his neck and tossed him onto the ship. He passed out when he hit the deck and he was asleep for probably 48 hours and woke up with a little tent over him and some corpsmen were working on him. He got up and he scoured that ship front to back, top to bottom, everywhere, talking to anyone who would listen. Who is this sailor that saved my life? Not only did nobody fit the description that he gave, but no one could even remember seeing the incident happen. Um, my father was convinced at that moment that that was his guardian angel that saved his life. So after the war, he gets stationed in Brazil where he meets, falls in love with, and marries my mother. She's Brazilian. And she's devoutly Catholic, but very spiritual. She lived in a little village called Cruz das Almas, which there's no veil there. It's like the dead walk among the living, and it's just like normal. But so she's very spiritual. She had my two older sisters there, and the birth of my second oldest sister was so difficult, my mother was warned never to try to have another child. She probably wouldn't survive the pregnancy. So now they move back to the States. My father goes out to sea, and somehow he contracts spinal meningitis, cephalitis, among other things, and
Wow.
complications that come with that. I don't know if there's a cure for that now, but I know then there wasn't. It was a death sentence. So they
Hmm.
rushed him back to the naval base that they were at in Northern California. He's like, when he's not in a coma, he's like a madman. So they have him like strapped down to this bed. And my mom gets this call from a doctor saying, if you want to see your husband alive again, come to the hospital now. He's probably not going to make it to morning. Well, she's freaking out. I don't know what she did with my sisters. Gave them to a neighbor or got some babysitter or something. Gets a cab to go to the hospital. She stops at the church on the way to the hospital, goes in there, and basically begs for God to spare my father's life. Promises him two things. If you spare my husband's life, from this day forward, whenever I go to church, I'll do it on my hands and knees, and I'll go ahead and have another child. She gets to the hospital. My dad's in a coma, falls asleep at his bedside. She wakes up in the morning and he's wide awake staring at her. And he asks her, Edith, what am I doing in this hospital all strapped into this bed? What's going on? Well, of course, she screams for the doctor and the nurses to come running in there. They undo the straps, let my dad get up. And They ran every test you can imagine. They couldn't find any traces of any of the disease in him anymore. So my mother knew, okay, now it's my time to step up to the plate. So until she was too old and physically couldn't do it any longer, from that day forward, every time she went to mass, she did it on her hands and knees. And she had another child.
Wow.
Ta-da! Yours truly. So she always called me, referred to me as her miracle baby. So I look back to that, and right there, the wheels were already in motion. It was already meant to be. This was supposed to happen, but I didn't. Of course, I didn't realize that till now.
Right.
But so then I realized why she said that to me. 10 years later, you should be a priest when you get older. You're going to do something great for God one day, she would say, and you should be a priest. So here I am on the set of Eli Roth Presents the Legion of Exorcists. Don't know how I got the gig. Landed in my lap. It's totally God. God doesn't get credit in the credits for this, but he's the true show creator here. He put us all together. Nobody in the show knows even how we got the gig. So it's 2 weeks in LA, and at the very end of shooting, we crammed in like 12 weeks of shooting into like 2 weeks. And it was long, long days, and it's the end of one day, and I'm sitting in my trailer, and in walks Bishop James Long. And this is after he's known me for a couple of weeks now. He's got this really kind of dumb grin on his face. And I know he's up to something. He's thinking something. The wheels are turning, but I don't know why. He says, "You mind if I come in and we talk for a little bit?" I go, "No, not at all, Bishop. Come on in. I just want you to know something. You have a true heart, and you would make a great priest. And if you would like to go down that path, look into the United States Old Catholic Church, my church, and I can pull some strings, get you in front of the board of bishops, and get you. Hopefully, you'll pass that interview, but get you into the seminary and get you on your way to becoming a priest." Well, what I didn't tell him at that time, I told him later. He knows now. But when he started to talk to me, and I promise I'll get through this without getting emotional. When he's talking to me, I see my mother's face on his face, and it's totally her voice
Right.
coming through telling me this. You should have a pure heart. You should be a priest. You'd make a great priest. Blah, 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 blah. And I knew right then. I didn't say anything. I said, let me think on it. Let me get home, talk to the wife, think about it. I'll get back to you. I already knew what the answer was going to be. How you can't say no to God or your mom coming through this bishop in
Right.
spirit telling you this. I already knew what the answer was, but I was a little, I wasn't scared, but I was like, this is why I got this job. This is why out of the blue, this job got landed in my lap and I'm on this show. This was it. So now, having said all that to you, people always say, well, how cool was being on the show? The show was a show was a show. I'm very proud of it and I love doing it. But you know what I get nowadays? I get people coming up to me saying, I've seen you on Legion of Exorcists. I normally don't watch those kind of shows. Something about it made me want to watch it. And watching you and listening to you tell your stories brought me back to my church and strengthened my faith again. I'm done. Stick a fork in me. I've already done. I'm not even a priest yet, and I've done my job.
See, I thought that you were a priest before you started that show, so that's very interesting. I watched the episode, which actually, I think I watched the episode on your podcast, where you brought on the other members of the show. And I think I watched that before I ever saw the actual show. And that made me want to watch the show more because just seeing all of you interact and all of your energy together, like that specific group of people, like you said, there was divine intervention bringing all of you together because it's a very diverse group, but it all you all work together very well. Your energy, everything is very very flowing and very I think it was meant to bring people from all walks, towards you all, if in that sense. And I
Yeah,
and I love that
Bishop
because
Rita, she gets so many women coming up to her and reaching out to her, just like, I didn't know women did what you do. You know, I've always felt like I could do that, but I didn't think women did it. You're an inspiration to me. You know, you got Donnie, um, and then we had the demonologist Rich, and then you got Bishop Long, Catholic, Christian. You're right. It was just everybody had a different have took a different path to
Right.
get to that spot. But at the same time, we were all the I don't know how the show creators and the producers knew. I don't know what they do, what that job is, but how they figured out that group would work. Pretty amazing how that works, because it could. How many shows do you see where you just know the cast can't stand each other?
Oh,
And I'm
all the
so
time.
I'm telling you, I am so annoying. I you know I I am a very annoying person, and I'm sure I annoyed them a lot. It's just my way. I like to kid and tease people and stir the pot, but that's just the way I am. But it's out of love, and you're right. The chemistry is great. I don't know if there'll be a season two. I don't know what goes all into that type of a decision, but if they come to me and say they're ready to do another season, I would be more than happy, because we all had the talk, like, this is either going to really, well, we all accepted it because we believed that the show was going to be awesome. And afterwards, we were totally proud of it. We didn't care if it was, even if it wasn't received well, we were still going to be proud of it. But we all decided, what do we want to do if they come to us with a season two? Is it going to be worse for what we're trying to do a season two, or are we all on board with that? Everybody's on board with it if it's still done the same way, and we're
Right.
able to. Well, there might be some changes, but if it's still that same thing where we get to share experiences and bounce it off one another, and just talk like we're in. Oh my gosh, that people think we were on a set. That was a
Right.
200-year-old Catholic church up in the hills above old Pasadena, the most beautiful church I've ever been
Wow.
in. And it was just, we were like all like in God's living room, lounging, having pizza, and talking about, you know, old war
So
stories.
I think that that's one of the things that, in the last few years, there's been such an increase in paranormal shows and documentaries and movies and everything. And it got to where so many of them um either people are being exploited in some of them, or the others just are completely off the wall and fake, and the people don't really take what they're doing seriously. There's been so many different opinions, I guess, of these new shows that are coming out. But I think for your show, what's important to understand, of course, there's always going to be, when you're retelling a story, of course, there's going to be some dramatization, things like that. That's even in people's everyday lives that happens. But I think, um, more importantly, since spiritual warfare is such an enormous part of our lives, um, it got to where there was a lot of competition in the field of paranormal activity, which is ridiculous to me. I tell people that all the time. I'm like, there are enough spirits
Yeah.
to go around, like, for all of us to have, to deal with them for the rest of eternity, for that matter. So why we're like competing against each other is ridiculous. Like, there's, and second of all, the more the merrier, the more, different perspectives, to me, to build this army of people who can actually confront things and learn how to deal with things, and from different walks of life and different cultures and different religions and things like that, is amazing to me. And I think that's what's so great about that show, and even about the people you bring on your podcast. So, that's what's amazing. That's my love-hate for the internet, because it does bring people together in that way. But um, we still have to deal with the electronic part of it. So
Yeah, absolutely.
what
And
go ahead, I'm sorry.
oh no, I
Kind of
was just saying
glitched out
that's
there for a
yeah,
minute.
I agree with you 100% with the electronic stuff. I'm surprised we even are pulling this off tonight, knowing what we were going to
I
talk
know.
about.
Me
That we're
too.
pulling it off. And if you feel the need at all for me to grab my book and say a prayer of protection over you and I and your audience, I'd be more than happy to just say the word.
I had a question for you. I wrote these down too because I was like, something will make me forget or something will happen. And so first of all, okay. So first of all, before I forget, this past weekend, I went to the Amelia Earhart Festival in Atchison, Kansas,
Cool.
and I was drawn to. They were giving tours of a very old church called the Trinity Episcopal uh, Church, which was where Amelia Earhart was baptized. And it was a beautiful church. They have some very unique. It's one of the biggest of its kind as far as the architecture. Um, and there's even a rose bush that was brought over from England. I mean,
Wow.
like almost 200 years ago. They went to their Connecticut church and they went um, to Atchison, Kansas. And the unique thing about this church, they did still have three remaining original Tiffany stained glass windows. And there was a gentleman there that gave us a tour, very nice, but I saw that my daughter and I talked to him a lot. And then when we left, I was like, there's something off about that guy. I mean, it was very not his personality or anything. I'm like, she's like, well, pretty sure he was a ghost. Like I was like,
I was just about to say, isn't Atchison one of the most
shoot.
haunted cities in America?
Well, yes, but and me being a medium, I mean, this happens to me all the time, and people don't believe it. Like, especially if there's a lot of people in one place, I don't see spirits as like some see-through holographic looking entity. Many of them come to me um full-bodied, apparition. It's not it's not one of those like woo like smoke and no, many of them look completely alive to me. So and have always, my entire life. So um it's something that I've gotten so used to most of the time, and I was like, huh, yeah, come to think of it, I don't think most of those other people were talking to, like, they didn't interact with him very much. So um but the interesting thing is he was telling the history of the church. um and he might be living, I mean, it might be completely wrong and go back there, but I say that because usually at this point in my life I can discern very well between, the living and the unliving. So that's why it was interesting. But it was on the 20, let's see, that would have been the 22nd, a portal day, you know and in that city, and the church is right on the river and the railroad. There's a lot of things going on there. So um but he was talking about how they didn't have a place, which happened a lot in the Midwest, especially when people were moving across to California and heading west, in the Oregon Trail. Back then, they didn't have a place, an actual building to hold their church services, so they held it. And you were saying, it's like, God came and sat you all down in someone's living room. Well, that's how they used to hold church services, in people's homes,
Yeah.
before they built a church. I had mentioned to him that the house I used to live in um, was previously um, owned or lived in by a minister and owned by a church. And um, one of my entryway was a funeral parlor, like, um, but they held church services there. And there was stained glass that would cast rainbows on the walls of my house
That's cool.
at certain parts of the day. Well, I was telling him this randomly. He even randomly told me about visiting the Sally house and how cameras weren't allowed to take pictures in his presence of him there. And I'm like, and that should have given it away. Like at that point,
Yeah.
I should have been like, oh, okay, no, no, I didn't pay attention. I wasn't paying attention. He took us upstairs
Your
and
daughter must be
the
sensitive too.
wallpaper. She is. She's very sensitive. So this is normal for her too.
Yeah.
It doesn't phase her. It's like an um, everyday occurrence. And so he took us upstairs to. They don't really use that part anymore. The old nurseries and where they held Bible school, and there were rainbows on the wallpaper all over the walls, and I'm like, oh, every plaque. They had a bunch of plaques on the wall from people who have, you know, been a part of the church in the past, who are no longer there, like memorial plaques, things like that. Every single plaque was the name of one of my ancestors. Every one of them.
Wow.
And like really odd names, not normal. And I'm like, okay. And but what he was telling me, he said, for that church to come together, the Methodist church and the Presbyterian church, which most people would be like, well, nowadays would be like, that's a very odd, combination. Um, but it was members of both of those churches that then became the Trinity Episcopal. And so we're not as different as we like to think. I mean, we label things as humans and separate things and all this, but even in the past, um, it wasn't what you called it. It wasn't where you held the service. It wasn't, you know what I mean? It wasn't, just like you're saying, it wasn't where you came from. To all kind of have the same purpose. And I thought that was really interesting as far as being drawn there to, that entire situation. But it made me think of, well, there's a lot of, I guess, how much do you think that we bring these energies back by continually, like with movies and, I know The Conjuring, I don't even know what some of the other ones, Exorcism of Emily Rose, those are some like major. But when there's a sequel to those, when there's and then you have all of these people going to and watching those movies and thinking about it and giving energy, do you think that essentially that kind of stirs up the energy again, or do you think that those movies and things like that being released at specific times follow the timelines of when these things would come back anyways?
I think it's why many times you won't see somebody like me or a demonologist mention a demon's name and talk about them specifically.
Right.
It's you got to be careful what because they're just floating around. You got to be careful what you say and
Exactly.
what you do because they latch on to any energy they can. It's like how many times have you heard people say really really silly stupid things like they don't even realize what they're saying, but something like I don't get the religion thing. I'm not a sheep. I would much rather rule in hell than to serve in heaven.
Hmm.
And you just want to just smack them. You got to really be
Right.
careful what energy you put out there and what you say and what you do because you never know what's floating around. They have rules, but you don't know really what they are. And you may
Hmm.
do something, say something that now all of a sudden you've made yourself a target and you've made this entity believe that it's been given permission to attach to you. And I
Right.
think a lot of these movies do that. They just keep stirring the pot and keeping that bad mojo going. So yeah, it's
And you hear about, I would say almost 100%. If you look at the statistics between horror movies, especially horror movies that focus on, demonic entities or things like that, or very old curses, and you get into, that type of energy. If you look at the difference between the statistics of accidents on the sets between those type of movies and like a comedy or, a romance or something like that, and people say, well, that movie was cursed, and it was probably because, well, of course it was. Of course
Yeah,
it was.
yeah. It's a
What do you
no-brainer. Yeah.
mean? You know? So it's always interesting to me, or even in the, with witches and in the pagan community. I'm gonna tell you, I don't know in this lifetime any, because especially pagans know how fast karma and energy works. So if we put something out there, even about ourselves, I tell my kids that all the time. I'm like, you have to be careful how you talk to yourself. That is energy. Thoughts become things. So even if you're telling yourself something, you start to believe it. If you're down on yourself, and so the curses work in the same way. And it doesn't matter what religion or anything, that is an energy. You're using your voice to, or your mind or whatever, if you have a thought about something or someone that you don't like and you say, I wish this happened to them. We're very careful about not doing stuff like that, because I'm sure most of us have learned at a very young age that those things happen right away. And then the repercussions for those things to us is, it comes back, it's absolutely karma. So, um, and a good example, my son was joking and my daughter was bothering him in Atchison, and he's a teenager, and he's like, I'm gonna just throw you in the river. I watched a wasp, right, like 2 seconds later, fly in his shirt and sting him. I look up the spiritual symbology of a wasp, or like a hornet, and it said protector of females. There you go. He wasn't even, he was just joking. Obviously, he's not going to throw his sister in the river. Well, I would hope he wouldn't throw his sister in the river, but
Put that energy out there, though.
exactly. But it was instantly, he was stung by a wasp. So, those things are so much more realistic than people believe. And I'm sure when people contact you about something going on in their lives, how do you, it's very hard for someone who doesn't believe in such things existing, and I'm sure you have that a lot as well. I guess, how do you get the message across that they have to kind of, things don't just, sure, there sometimes houses are haunted before people get their locations, whatever, but a lot of times it's something going on in the household. So how, in a sense, you have to be a counselor to that as well. And I guess, what's your method or process for dealing with that?
Well, when we first get a phone call, I usually do an initial phone interview. Sometimes I have the wife go in after me and talk to the same person herself, and then her and I will talk a little bit. 99.9% of the time, we end up sending them an intake form. Now, the intake form's pretty lengthy, and we require that everybody's in the house get together as a family unit and sit down and fill out this, have open communication, talk amongst themselves, help each other fill this intake form out, send it back to us. I'll read it, I'll have the wife read it, we'll talk again, and then we usually have a pretty good idea what we're going to do then. Now, here's the sad thing. Sometimes you think people are at rock bottom. Things can't get any worse for that. Things can always get worse. But sometimes you talk to these people and they come at you and it's like, you know, they feel themselves or one of their family members' life's in danger. They are telling me these horrific stories about this, you know, living situations, the demonic infestation, and multiple people oppressed, and possibly one maybe more possessed. And you expect that they're just going to really 110% buy into what you're telling them they need to do to help you help them.
Right.
And then when you start getting into what the kind of things that they need to do, usually, not always, but usually they've done something, whether they realize it or not, they've done something to cause themselves to become a target.
Mm-hmm.
And once they're the target and these entities move into their life, everybody around them is also a target. And you'd
Yeah.
be surprised how many people then will fight you, and not want to do some of the things you're telling them they need to do. A lot of people don't realize this, and this is probably the hardest thing to get somebody to realize. Now their life is turned upside down. They're under attack. Maybe they've already had some really awful things happen, like a death or two in the family, or a couple of animals die, or some bad accidents, really freaky bad accidents. They've seen things. Um, but they don't realize that they really are the ones that have the power
Mm-hmm.
to turn things around and get their lives back and get their homes back and bring their family in under this protective umbrella, spiritual protective umbrella. But when a person is going through that stuff, making them believe that
Right.
is hard. They think nothing's going to get better until I physically am there and I'm going to make it all better. And I'm here to tell you, nobody in my field has all the answers, knows it all,
Right.
has seen it all, and none of us have magic powers. We can't come in there and wave a magic wand and make it all get better. We need the help from the people that are under attack, and they need to do what we're asking them to do. But sometimes, as bad as things can be for them, sometimes they're still not willing to do the things you're asking them to do. And that's the hardest thing. But everybody in that household, one person cannot be on board with something as simple as, if I'm going to come over and do a complete house and property cleansing, blessing, and exorcism, even if
Right.
nobody's possessed, something that simple, if it's one person in that under that roof that think that that's not going to help and think that that's silly and they don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
a part of it, let me know when this weirdo is going to come over and do this stuff. I'm going to go to the movies and then I'll call you. And when he's gone, I'll come back. If you got one person that feels that way and believes that way, nothing's going to help. Sometimes, and this is a hard thing for people to swallow too. Sometimes these people that are in the house need to go. If it's a family member, that's hard. If it's just somebody
Yes.
that's a friend that's renting a room, can still be really hard, but not as hard. But sometimes these people have to go. And
Mm-hmm.
if you can't get them to go, sometimes you have to get up and go. But you mentioned curses earlier. I'm running into a lot of that. And you have somebody in the house that's practicing um, witchcraft, for lack
Right.
of a better term. I don't know what else to call it. Um, but they're casting spells, they're conjuring, they're doing things they shouldn't do, and other family members or friends know that this person is doing that, and they allow them to continue to do that, but they want me to come over and do whatever it is I need to do to make things better. It doesn't work that way. So it can be, people can, they don't realize that they're fighting you,
Right.
but they are, and it's really a hard and sad thing. I have to I'm embarrassed to admit to how many cases I have to cut loose and walk away from because I realize I'm not the guy for them. Sometimes I try to find another paranormal team or some other laity or clergy person that has enough deliverance ministry knowledge to go in there and maybe help make things better, that might be more suited to them. But sometimes I'm not able to do that. It's really hard when I have to walk away from cases, and I walk away from a lot of them. It's sad.
I think, it's, to me, it's no different. Even with spirits, which I'm sure you ran into also, trying to help cross over or heal or what have you. sometimes even spirits are that way and won't listen, and it's one of those things. It reminds me, because I've also been through this, so I know from experience when I'm saying this to people that um ask me how I know type of thing, because it reminds me of a domestic violence situation. It's the complete mind control, and spirits are no different, especially um really old powerful entities can have that, especially if they've been attached to somebody their entire life, or an entire family, or what have you. But it reminded me of, when I was in a domestic violence situation, and the neighbors would call the cops or something, and this was 15-20 years ago now. But the same, when the police would show up and stuff, and they're like, Trish, what are you doing? Like, we were just here last week and arrested this guy, and uh, you came back, like, what? You know what I mean? And it as a person being in that situation, you can't tell someone in that situation, no matter what someone outside of themselves tells them, they have to make the choice to change, and it wasn't until I had my son and made it, just I'm like, no, if I have to be the one to walk away and never look back to that type of lifestyle, or allowing somebody like that, and whatever it is, because otherwise, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And what continues is what we allow. Absolutely. So, and it is hard.
One of the hardest things here, like I'm in Las Vegas, and I'm going to get hate mail for this too, but I get a lot of women that reach out to me that are strippers. They're not whores. They don't sell their body for sex, but they're strippers. They're beautiful. They're talented dancers. They make a ton of money. But they'll look me right in my face and tell me, I smoke a little pot, I drink a little bit, occasionally I'll do a little coke. I try to stay away from the meth, but sometimes I slip up. But I'm not addicted. But I can't, I don't know how to do anything else, and I'm good at what I do, and I make a ton of money. Okay, but then I say to them, but you have a demonic entity that's basically raping you at night, um, every night, whether you're sitting on the couch watching TV, you're taking a shower, or sleeping in the middle of the night, and it follows you from your home to your work. Sometimes you start getting beat up while you're on stage performing, and people freak out, like, this girl having an epileptic attack. What's going on? You need to stop doing that kind of work. I don't care if
Right.
you end up going to a car wash and washing cars. You need to, but they're not going to stop doing that work. That work originally, and their bad habits originally made them a target, and they said or did something and allowed this thing to come into their life. Now they can't get rid of it. But if I'm going to help them, they need to totally walk away from that lifestyle. It reminds me of a case I had with a very well known, highly sought after adult film star whose boyfriend was basically pimping her and
Oh, wow.
brought her into the biz, and she was very good. I didn't want to look her up by myself, so I'd bring my wife in and say, I want to see if this girl's for real. Let's look her up and try to find her. And she didn't lie. That's the biz she was in. But here's the key. She wanted out, but she knew she had to get away from her boyfriend. But she knew that this attachment was so attached that she needed help to get it off her. But then once that happened, she knew that she would be free to be able to you know, to move on, to get away
Hmm.
from it all. So that's a success story. That was a possession case, of course, and it was very ugly. But I had to bring a nun with me, and she was Jewish, so I almost had to pass on the case because she didn't have any faith in me that I could help her. A baptized Catholic, a guy in the seminary that's going to be a Catholic priest, an ordained Christian minister could help her. So I did have to reach out and get a Jewish exorcist, Messianic Jew who believed in Christ, to come with me and help. But it was her willingness to want to get out of that lifestyle, which was probably one of the key factors to that case being able to us being able to bring it to closure. And we got her away from her pimp fiance. She got out of the biz. She had to move. I said, you got to move out of this town. There's no way the lifestyle you lived for so many years and as deep into it as you were into, you can't even stay in this town any longer. And I'm happy to report that she did move. I hate telling people to have to do that, but she moved and to another state, um, met another great guy, got like a secretary job somewhere because she's a smart woman, um, and turned her life around. But she had to want to do that, and I don't get that all the time. That's how important it is that I want people that are hearing me to know that if you're going through this kind of stuff, you've got to be prepared to make some big changes. Someone
Yeah.
like me just can't walk in and wave a magic wand and make it all better. You've got to be 110% ready to do whatever it is somebody like me. We're not going to tell you to do anything crazy. We're going to tell you things that you need to do that are going to help you get your life back. And you got to be willing. If you reach out to somebody like me, you got to be willing to do those things.
Right.
And if you're not, it's not going to go well.
It's the same as being, when I was working as a personal trainer, and I would have people that had like gastric bypass surgery or something to that nature, but they weren't willing to change their relationship with food. Well then it doesn't matter what doctors do. It doesn't matter, no different than cancer patients. It's usually a product of their environment. And so recently, I had to move when my house was sold. I was looking at different towns. I was traveling to different. So since I work mostly remotely and as an artist and stuff, I could live anywhere essentially. And there was this very nice town I went to, which seemed great and really appealing and everything. But I'm like, there's been a lot of death here, and not just death. I mean, there's death anywhere, but there was like a lot of really tragic accidents and suicides and murder, all this stuff, and I'm like, and I kept smelling burning everywhere I went, not just, and it wasn't, I'm like, this isn't something that's following me. It's like when I would walk into a building, but I'm like, it's the entire town. And even before I went there, I saw like a giant cloud over the town. I'm like, well, that's got to be an indication that
That's not good. Yeah.
it's not just one person, it's not just one house, it's the entire, and things like that absolutely are, it is like darkness is contagious, um which people don't understand. So I learned that the hard way. I was a table games dealer at a casino, and it almost killed me, absolutely almost killed me, especially being very sensitive and empathic. And when I would shake people's hands and I would see, there's bad people that come through casinos, believe it or not. I mean, they have done some very bad stuff. Not all of them, obviously, but, and
A
I was
lot.
just doing my job, but there's a lot of negative energy in that environment because the gambling is an addiction. There was drinking and smoking, and who knows what they do in their rooms, but I would shake people's hands and I would see some of the terrible things they had done, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to start wearing gloves or something, but I couldn't because I was, I didn't want to touch people anymore. And I was like, man, that absolutely transfers to everyone you're around. Whether I wasn't involved in any of it, but of course, it's the environment I put myself in, and so that took a long time to to come back from. I had a heart attack not long
Oh my
after
gosh.
I quit there. So yeah, there was, especially, I say I was only doing my job, but it wasn't just that. I was also contributing. I was contributing to people's addictions, even though I don't drink, I don't do drugs, things like, I don't even gamble for that matter. I was playing a part. I had a hand in it,
Yeah.
So I was
Well,
no
people
different.
ask me all the time. I mean, we all have eyes, we all have ears. We see how much evil is in the world today. In my humble opinion, in my 63 years of being on the face of this earth, it's as darkest as I've ever seen it. And I'll give you two examples. I'm walking down the street the other day with this shirt on, or a shirt like it, and there's a young girl, teenager, walking towards me. I don't know her. Looked normal, a little gothy, but other than that, looked pretty normal. Don't know what she did. She starts staring at me, and I can see she's staring right at my neck. And we start to walk past each other. And when she gets to my side, I can see out of my side vision that she has turned towards me and is leaning forward. So I'm thinking maybe she's going to hug me. So I start kind of getting ready for the contact and leaning away a little bit. She yells in my ear so loud that I couldn't even hear out of that ear for like an hour. Yells in my ear, Jesus wasn't real. And then just looks forward and keeps on walking. Totally normal, like that never just happened. Well, I immediately pulled out the holy water, and on her back as she's walking away, I blasted her a couple of times, didn't say anything. And it was weird. As the holy water was hitting her, she was like jerking and just kept walking. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty deep. And people ask me all the time, why is it the way it is right now in the world? I'm not trying to convert anybody, and I'm not the kind of guy that's going to get his preach on. You're not going to see me on the corner on a box with a sign that says repent now, the end is near, hitting people in the head with the Bible and stuff. It's not my style. But what I will say is people have gotten away from God. God can mean anything to you. I've got indigenous friends that we don't know if we pray to the same God, but they pray to, the Great Father. Even pagans that I know that are friends of mine. It's Mother Earth and all of that stuff, and they're of all love and light, and it's just nature based. But
Right.
they're good people. We've gotten away from that. People just being good and knowing that most of these people will tell you that they believe in a much lower vibrational, darker, malevolent world below us. Obviously, there has to be yin yang, the flip side of that, a much
Right.
higher vibrational power of love and light above, and whatever name you want to attach that, fine. But we got away from believing in that and just trying to be the best version of yourself you can every day and treat people the way you want to be treated. And this is tough, but if people really started working hard again and nobody I know right now can do it unless they're clergy, and even some of them that I know have a hard time with it. People need to get back to learning how to turn the other cheek, forgiving, forgetting, praying for their enemy, and just trying to be good to their fellow man.
Yeah.
Humanity has gotten away from that, and we've allowed the darkness to just come through us now rampantly like a cancer. And it's just times are really, really bad right now. And I tell people, I'm not going to say we're in end times, but things aren't good right now spiritually. And you better get good with God. Whoever that is for you, better get good with them, because something's coming. And there's going to be a lot of collateral damage. And you don't want to be that. You don't want to be on that end of it. You want to be above it all, looking down, and go, "Ooh, I'm glad I'm not in the midst of that stuff."
Now, so I have a lot of back when I was very religious, never missed church. I was part of a big part of the church I attended even. And back when after one of the times I died, sometimes and sometimes people get the wrong impression that when they become more religious, things will stop happening. That's not always the case. Like with
Oh,
me, it got even worse,
yeah,
you know,
your talents make
and
you a target.
exactly. And so I started seeing battles of like literally angels and demons in the sky. And, the sky would turn red and I would see scorpions, all these things. And I told um, my church and members of my church, and they just looked at me like I was crazy. And so I was very isolated for a long time.
The little
And
denial going on there because you freak them out at the same time. People believe in
Right.
that stuff, but when someone who they really suspect is probably gifted and really seeing that stuff, it all of a sudden gets a little too real.
Right. And they're like, oh, yeah, we don't, and so that's when that would have made me very, in the grander scheme of things, that would have been a very vulnerable time for me to be, go towards like the darker side or something, because that's how it works. And um I went through an entire period of pretty much being alone in any type of trying to understand spirituality and all of these different things, and then almost dying again. And it wasn't until um I made this video a few years ago. That was one of the first ones that I was talking about. When it's like when your kids are doing something that you don't want them to do, and you keep telling them no, and they keep going back and doing it over and over and over and over again, and you just want to say stop. And I said that's no different than like our angels or our guides or divine, whatever you believe in. Um, they do the same thing to us. You know, they're like, stop doing what you're doing. And I was thinking, in those moments, y- there's not always somebody that's going to come save you. There's not. Um, I mean, as far as in our realm, in the 3D, there's people. You might be completely alone for that matter. And that's when you really, I think, when people get away from believing in a higher being and a creator, um, it really affects the love they have for themselves, self-love. And that's what it's about. You love yourself more in those moments, um because that's what your parents do. That's what your guides, your angels, your whatever does. So sometimes, granted, it's tough love, but but um
How many kids do
there's
you have, if you don't mind me asking?
I have 2 kids.
Good for you.
um
I have a feeling that you're just a great mom.
I don't know that they think I think.
Kids never think you're a great dad or a great
No,
mom, but
until you stop doing something,
uh,
and then they're like,
yeah,
"Oh, dang, I should have appreciated that."
yeah. But I know you love them more than life itself.
Now, I have always questioned, and through that entire spiritual experience that I had, that almost a few of them, and people laugh because they're like, "Wow, they've really been trying to give you a message for years after being struck by lightning and electrocuted, and all these things happen that I've lived through." Um, it got to where, and I've studied multiple different religions. I've studied different Bibles, different, and I got to where I was like, you know what? I take something from many different religions, because when it comes down to it, they're just they're many of the peaceful religions, anyways, are basically the same story, just from a different part of the world or told differently. But they have the same core, values and concepts. And so, but as far as the Bible, there were a lot of things I questioned, growing up. Even now, I'm like, okay, well, but there's parts in the Bible that believe in like slavery, like Exodus. You go back to that, it talks about, taking women as slaves, or men and their women as slaves, and all of these things. So it's very confusing, I think, to people in modern times with any, no different than the argument between, witches and Christians in drinking the blood of Christ. Most people would say that that's like blood magic. So what is your, I guess, I'm sure you get those things all the time too. And how do you kind of, I don't know what's the word, tackle the conflicts that come along with your job?
I it's weird. It's like when the show came out, so many people that I thought really loved me and cared about me and would be happy, really, really happy for me, sent me some of the most terrible messages that, um, and I never responded back. Yeah, I don't need it in my life. I just unfriended them,
Right.
and then, some I blocked, some I didn't. I just wanted to walk away from that. I really don't do drama well. I don't like to lay it on people, and I don't like it when people lay it on me. So when I don't normally get into real deep conversations about uh, politics or religion with people. And what's weird with me is that, here I am, baptized Catholic, also confirmed in Catholicism. Um, and here, all these years later, went through catechism, more Bible study classes that I can even recall in my lifetime. So here I am at 63. Who enters the seminary at 63? I don't know. I did. And I am amazed all the things that I'm realizing that I didn't know by going through the seminary about my own religion.
Right.
Now it's all the way, good, bad, whatever however you want to look at it. It's also got a lot to do with the way that you are brought up. Here I am, being brought up by um, a woman who was probably the most devout Catholic I've known in my life, and a man who wasn't Catholic, got baptized before he died, and was a God fearing man all his life. But you would just consider him probably just, a Christian, but wasn't really a church going. But he was a God fearing man, and he was a good man. But, you know, uh, raised that way and listening to his stories about his guardian angel and all the, religious stories my mom told me. And there were a lot of questions I've had about my faith all my life. But having witnessed firsthand many situations where I experienced true divine intervention, um, may not have cleared up some of the questions that I still have, but it's gone to me a point where I'm like, I don't even care anymore. I don't, whatever questions I had before, it, whatever was responsible for what I just saw, I'm good to go. Take me now. I'm cool. I don't, I don't need to really overthink it anymore because of the things that I've experienced. So my style is, if somebody wants to sit and listen to me, and I probably am really boring, but if somebody wants to take the time to listen to me, I like to tell people the situations where I've experienced divine intervention, like with my wife's attack. Here she is, the healthiest person I knew on the planet. Didn't drink, didn't smoke, no history of cancer in her family. And after 2 months of getting beat up by the devil, we get it out of the house. We think we're home free. That quick, she comes home from work one day and she's talking like she's having a stroke. And I'm like, honey, are you okay? She says, well, I think I broke a tooth and my tongue is scraping on it. And now my tongue's all inflamed and I think infected. So I'm going to go to the dentist. I already made an appointment. I'm all good. Well, let me know what he says as soon as you go there. I suspected something was weird because we just got done going through this ordeal. She goes to the dentist. He says right away, uh, that's not a broken tooth. Your tongue isn't scraping on a broken tooth. I'm going to send you to an ear, nose, and throat specialist. He wouldn't say the word. But I suspected when she came home. We went to this ear, nose, and throat specialist, and he just took one peek in there and he said, that's cancer. So now all of a sudden, and it wasn't just the one cancer, like in a matter of like days,
Mm-hmm.
her tongue became like a golf ball sized tumor.
Wow.
And that metastasized down into her throat, became a rare form of throat cancer, and then that metastasized down to her thyroid and became medullary thyroid cancer, which is the worst of the two. That spread to all sorts of lymph nodes in her neck. And I mean, she had a feeding tube in for over a year, and there were like, I want to say months where she couldn't even swallow water.
Wow.
She went from like 140 pounds to like 95. They had her in the isolation ward for a couple of weeks at a time, many times during this. I tell people all the time, yes, all the cancer doctors and the surgeons and all the people, the chemotherapy doctor and the radiation doctor and the surgeons, all of them did save her life. Yes, absolutely. But they will also all tell you that they absolutely didn't expect her to survive. And I know that it was divine intervention why she survived because of why she got what was responsible for her having these things. This is one night, like I'm sitting there, we're looking at her in bed, and I just know for a fact, I know for a fact she's going to die. I know for a fact that I'm going to wake up next to a dead lady in the morning. I know that. I mean, it's the worst I've ever seen her this one night. I just know it. So I'm like, well, nothing's going to happen to her. The house is clear. She's in bed with two mastiffs. No one's going to get in here and hurt her. I need to do something now. So my mother's talking to me from heaven. You know what to do. And I knew what to do. I left the house quietly and I went to this all night prayer chapel around the corner where from the front door, I crawled on my hands and knees all the way to the altar, threw myself on the mercy of the court, if you will. I don't know how long I laid there, probably 2 hours. Just whatever, talking to God as if He's sitting there. Whatever you want, whatever I must have said everything in the process of pleading for my wife's life. All of a sudden, I just felt like it's time to go. So I crawl all the way back out of the chapel. I'm driving home, and I'm like, as much as I felt that everything was cool, I really honestly thought I was going to walk in and she was already going to be dead. So I was dreading that. Like God was letting me down easy, but He's going to do something to get me through this, but that's probably what He set me up for. So I'm kind of dreading it. But I come in, I sneak in quietly, I look, I listen, I just watch her. She's still breathing. I'm like, huh. My phone starts ringing. This is like 3 in the morning now. My phone starts ringing. I'm like, well, I have two older sisters and a brother, younger brother. Maybe there's a family emergency. I better answer. I answer the phone. It's a friend of mine named Russ. Hadn't seen him in years, but I've known him all my life. One of the nicest, biggest hearted people you ever want to meet in your life. Would do anything, would die for me, would die for me. But he was an atheist. He's living in New York now and he's on his deathbed dying of advanced colon cancer.
Oh.
But he sounds in this conversation in great spirits and so alert and in great spirits. I'm like, dude, what are you calling me at 3 in the morning for? Are you okay? He says to me, I don't have much time left, but I want you to know that I just saw God, and God told me to call you and tell you Sharon's going to live, and you need to get back to battling those responsible for this because I had left the field. I was never going to go. I wasn't going to finish my. I was there. I wasn't going to. I'm done. I hadn't even gone through the one case where I was attacked and probably died. I hadn't even had that yet. That happened after I got ordained. But I knew then, getting this phone call from him, lifelong atheist, he has no reason to call me and say that. And it was just hours later he passed. But sure enough, he didn't lie to me. My wife made a dramatic turnaround. And next thing you know, she's able to eat normal. She still has to be careful what she eats because she can have choking episodes, but she's able to eat normal. So the feeding tube comes out. She finishes all her other treatments and she's just putting on weight and looking better and feeling better. And I'm happy to announce that the last full body CT and MRIs that we've done show no metastasis of the disease anywhere. That's divine
That's
intervention. That's
amazing.
God.
Yeah.
So I got back to my training, finished, got ordained, and it was like the very next case. Um, well, a couple of cases later, I wasn't ordained yet, and a pastor friend of mine wanted me to help her with a demonic case. And to be honest with you, I was still a little scared. I'm embarrassed now to even. God knew I was scared, but I'm embarrassed to admit that I was scared. I didn't want to work this case, but she begged me. So I went with her on this case, and it was on this case that I had a vision of the Holy Spirit, which got me just that little bit I needed to go a little bit further, get ordained, and it was the very next case after becoming an ordained minister. It was a really, really ugly possession case where I lost, I don't know how much time I lost. Probably, I don't even know. But I was attacked in a hallway and carried from the hallway by something all the
Right.
way to the other end of the house. And I woke up on my back on the master bedroom bed, staring up at the ceiling. But I remember what I went through during this time of the attack. And what brought me out was this voice of this woman who sounded just like my mentor at the time. But my mentor's like on the other side of the United States, but it's like she's sitting right next to me, talking in my ear, telling me, pray, dummy, pray. Because I had given up. I figured whatever's got me, got me. I wasn't ready for it. I didn't have my
You should
guard
never
up.
give up.
It was so bad. I couldn't move. Felt like I was being stuck with many cattle prods. Um, and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Extreme pain. And I heard all just what sounded like thousands and thousands of people just moaning and crying, and the smells. I just knew that I was being drugged to hell. And I
Right.
figured this is how I'm going to go. Then I hear that voice, so I just start praying. And next thing I know, I come out of this funk and I sit up in the bed. I know this is going to be TMI, but I sit up in the bed and I realize that I had urinated and defecated in my pants, which I hadn't done since I was a little kid. And I was really, really embarrassed. But at the same time, I was like, who cares? Something brought me back. I knew that I was on my way to hell, and I knew something brought me back from that. So I got up, I took my jacket off, I tied it around my waist, and I walked to the other side of the house where the client was. And I told the client, I'm going to go home and review evidence, and I'll come back and let you know what I find. But I need to go now because I wasn't going to stay in
Right.
that condition. And that case, we brought that case to closure too. But I like to tell these people these stories because that's God. All of that's God. I'm not special. He's there for everybody. If you really, really ever need God and ask and He knows if you're being serious or not. If you call on Him for help and He knows you're not 100% serious, I don't know if you're going to get the help you need, but if you
Yes.
really need help from God and you mean it and you call on Him, He's there to do the same kind of thing for you as He did for me. Um, and that's why I like to share stories like that with people so they know there is
Well,
something else.
sorry, go ahead.
There is something else.
Oh,
I
yes.
and
Plus, I was going to
regardless,
say that's what negative entities and demonic entities want in any situation is for you to feel shame and guilt and fear and everything else because that lowers your vibration even more. That brings you down even more, and that's what they feed off of. So, being in that situation, when you do the opposite of that, I tell people that all the time. In my situation, like I said, my family, my entire church, I was completely alone, aside from my kids. Um, in this world a few years ago thinking, "W what am I gonna do?" I'm like, "Well, who would I even" when I was asking my spirits and spirit guides, who would I even tell my story to? Look at all the shame and the guilt and the, embarrassment, and I'm like, "Pff, it what do I have to lose?" And they said, "You know what? Tell the world. Tell the world. Your shame is your fame,"
if
when
your
you
message
can.
reaches just one person that message is meant
Absolutely.
for, then you've done your job.
Absolutely. Because in the end, once you've seen things like that, legitimately being drugged to hell, uh, or whatever your perspective is of it, it there's not much. I don't care who on this plane of exist. Nobody can judge me on this plane of existence. and we're the biggest critics of ourselves for that matter. So we live in an entire society full of imposter syndrome, basically. But again, that's another thing that that negative entities feed off of. So I mean, go big or go home, quite literally. Like, what do you have to lose? People respect you more, I've learned, when you're real and you're raw and you're honest. Because if somebody tells you, and that's why I respect you. If somebody can sit there and tell you what actually happened in a situation in their life that otherwise, another time they might have been embarrassed of or something, you know, they probably don't have an ulterior motive to, you know what I mean? Like, it's more honest, and there's not a lot of that in the world today. Um so I think that's a very good thing that you do share your story. Because, and as far as your wife, I kept hearing throat chakra, so she's in a profession where her voice needs to be heard, but it'll be attacked all the time because of that. So if she eats healing, as a trainer and nutritionist and stuff, I started studying all of these things, especially and maybe that's my purpose, and that's why you and I came together tonight, for me to, because I was just thinking that I'm like, wow, maybe, even trainers need trainers. Like, it's one of those things. Maybe that's because I automatically see when somebody's especially with spiritual people, for some reason, when they're sick or they have something, like, I automatically know the what can combat the effects and the symptoms they have very easily. And so if she focuses on healing throat chakra foods, things like that, it might help
I'm
her.
going to give you some homework. Um, but you didn't expect your guest would give you homework tonight.
Oh, they
Two
all
things.
do.
I want you to, after the interview tonight, send me a private message on what you might charge me to make up a promo for my show, similar to what you did promoting this interview tonight, which just, wow, was awesome.
Thank you.
And send me a list of some of those throat chakra foods. She like I said, she's very particular what she eats. She has to be careful what she eats, because if she
Right.
chews and swallows the wrong kind of food the wrong way, her throat will never work the same. So she sometimes will get excuse me, choking
See, throat
episodes.
chakra. Yeah.
So she has to be careful.
And when I say healing chakras, as far as people in the spiritual community, it doesn't always necessarily, sometimes, and it's not your typical grounding, and it's not your typical, even in the native culture, which of course I have that in my blood as well. When I healed myself from Lyme disease, which has targets every organ in your body and is incurable, I had 1% chance to live. But I started doing non-typical I started doing art again. And so a lot of things that people don't always think of, like colors have vibrations. Those are very healing as far as your chakras. There's a lot of things, um, even your animals and you know certain locations have different vibration, things like that. Music. um See, my dog, she woke up when I said that. She's like,
We're
yes, I
animal
do my
lovers.
job every night.
We're animal lovers
um
too.
Things like that. It absolutely saved my life. And I think, um even with like shamans and stuff like that, they end up getting like an immune suppressant disease where everything is attacked at once, like all of their cells. And that's why, because there's things. You're right. We are targets when we're, especially when, if you're an influencer, if you're in the public eye, that makes you even more of a target, because then you're open to a bigger network of humans, for that matter, much less spirits. But in the spirit world as well, you kind of make yourself a beacon. um but I've learned in that the fear is the greatest illusion, I think. Now, with another question I had with demonic entities, a lot of times they absolutely attack and attach themselves in my own life anyways, or my experiences, or the times I've been possessed myself, to and it's probably from past lives as well, or past life contracts, things like that. That, I'm not even, I wouldn't have even known I made, maybe. Um, but as far as how do you how do you deal with that, I guess? Because if that's something, it's kind of like, no matter, back to the thing, the concept of it, it doesn't matter what the doctor does, or what you all do, as far as I mean, sure, there's divine intervention, but have you figured out ways to kind of get to the root of the problem, I guess, from that perspective, to tackle different entities?
I try not to overthink it, and I try to just keep it simple. I mean, with non-human entities, or disembodied human spirits, I should say. When I was young and didn't know what I was seeing and confided in my mom, she said, "You're seeing ghosts, and they're just people that don't have a body anymore. Nothing to fear. And if they're appearing to you,
Right.
they either have a message for you or they need your
Mhm.
help with something. And if you are willing to hear the message, or if you think you can help them and you want to, fine. If you are too freaked out and you can't handle it, then ask them to stop bothering you. That you can't help them, and to please stop bothering you, and they will."
Right.
Um, then when I was seeing things that were darker, she when I was young, she wouldn't come right out and tell me what it was that I was seeing. But like, for instance, when it was nap time, she would say, "Now listen, we're going to take a nap, and when we take a nap, I want you to grab a handful of my hair, and I'm going to get a really good hard grip on your leg, so these things that you're seeing that you're not liking can't take you from me." So many, many years later, I look at that, and that was her way of dealing with some darker things that obviously I was seeing that were up to no good, and possibly.
Right.
Um, but I keep it simple. To me, they're just fallen angels. Um, they play by some rules. Sometimes you know the rules, sometimes you don't. And I just try to. I don't worry too much about names of demons, and why they're doing what it is they're doing to whoever they're doing it to. I find that if my big weapon is, like, I'll give you an example. High noon here in Vegas in the middle of summer, when it's 115 degrees and there's a house that there's no shade around. When it's the house is infested with the demonic, as I'm walking up to the house, it appears to me as though I'm already looking at it through sunglasses, because it's like you said, it's got that cloud over it, and it's just like engulfed in like a funky dark mist.
Mhm.
When I get to the front door, I don't even enter the house walking. I say some very special prayers, and then I crawl on my hands and knees over the threshold and into the home, because my biggest enemy, and something demons can't imitate, or the devil can imitate, is humility. So to me, that is the most humble thing that I can do, is to crawl into the home. And then I usually, if I haven't already heard them or felt them leaving then, and sometimes that's all it takes,
Yeah.
I line the whole family up on the couch, and I'll wash everybody's feet in a bowl of holy water, which is something Christ did to the apostles, which is also a very humble thing. That's usually then they're done. They're gone then, because they just can't handle it. But I have been blessed to be able to. I've had people work with me that say something happens to you and you really change on these cases. And I think what it is I've just been blessed to be able to allow myself to be a vessel to allow the Holy Spirit and warrior angels and um, peaceful angelic beings to come through and take care of what needs to be taken care of. I don't come alone, is what I'm saying, and I keep that all of that on a simple basis like that. I try not to overthink it, um, and then that works for me.
What is your, you've already told us the process you go through kind of at the beginning with questions, and what's one of, if you can, if you're able to talk about it, one of the worst cases you've experienced?
Well, I would have to say one would be um, the one that left my wife with her cancer. Then two, I would have to say, would be when I was under attack and probably died. And divine intervention, something brought me back from that. I would have to say that those would probably be one or two. Recently, though, I'd have to say the case with the adult film star was that exorcism when she finally I bat nothing's going. We're sitting in this woman's apartment for a long time, and the rabbi is doing some of the most beautiful singing out of from this scroll that I had ever heard. I didn't understand the language, but it was just so beautiful to watch him doing his thing and praying and singing. And I kept asking her. I finally decided to do something I don't normally do, which is um, provoke a little bit, but not too much. I don't believe in religious provocation, but I was provoking enough to say, uh, "Is it here? Is it hiding? Is it going to show itself?" You know, trying to get something out of this girl. And I said, she says, "It's here." And I go, "Where is it?" She goes, "Right there." And everybody heard it. We all look over, and in the corner of this kitchen, in this wall, we start to see what appears to be black mold coming
Mhm.
out of the wall, and then a very small little strand of this black mold goes up the crack where the walls meet, the corner, and then it starts coming across the ceiling and it stops right above her and slowly starts to drip on her. And as it's dripping on her, you could clearly see the possession take over and
Yeah.
the entity manifest through her while this was going on. And it's a team effort. I don't think I would have been successful there by myself. I think it was a team effort with the I had a retired nun there who was very psychically gifted. I had recently been gifted from a Carmelite nun convent in the Midwest. It's hanging on the wall in my hallway. This crucifix with corpus on it that's almost as big as I am was gifted to me shortly before this case. Why it was gifted to me, I have no clue. Out of the blue, this Carmelite nun convent gifts me this cross, and something told me to bring this cross with me to this case. So I did. But as things were getting pretty hairy at one point, this woman is doing this is probably a case that they can't if they really show what happened, they probably couldn't do it on TV. But it was the things that she was doing to herself and wanting to do to the rabbi and me, um, very over the top, abusively sexual. So we have to stop her from doing that, from hurting herself, and we have to make sure she doesn't hurt us. Um, a lot of violence towards the nun because there was another female, and this was the entity was all about torturing the female unit. But when things got to be really pretty bad, the nun says to me, "Your mom's here." My mom had recently passed, so I thought my mother was there. So when my mother's here, I'm looking around for my mom. She goes, "Your mother's here." I go, My mother? Your mother's here." All of a sudden, it's at this moment we're smelling what sounds like somebody took a forklift and picked a porta potty up from a park that had been sitting out in the hot sun for 3 months, having gone through a couple of outdoor concerts and hadn't been emptied, brought into this apartment and just dumped in there. That's what it smelled like, and then set on fire.
Well,
So it was pretty bad. So bad that I had to take some CSI cream and put it in my nose because I was getting very nauseous. Once you smell the smell, you need to smell the smell to know what you're dealing with.
yeah.
But once you smell the smell, if you can't function. Do what you need to do to help yourself function. But all of a sudden, it felt as though you were up on top of a mountain and you were smelling the most crispest, cleanest air you'd ever smelled, and like you'd fallen face forward into a field of the most beautiful smelling wildflowers you'd ever smelled in your life.
Oh, that's a red flag.
That's
Definitely.
when we knew. We all looked towards the other end of the living room, and we've talked about this many times since this case. We all are convinced we saw the Virgin Mary coming through this wall from the outside and just standing there. And then I heard another voice say to me, "Take my son through the house." Again, I'm a little confused. Take my son through the house. Take her son through the house. Grab that big crucifix, pick it up, and take it to the house, which is what I did. And the rabbi, the nun were taking care of the woman. I go through this whole house. Lots of things are happening. People ask me all the time, have you ever seen levitation? No, I've had things thrown at me. I guess that's a form of levitation. I saw levitation once with a possessed girl in a wheelchair, and the wheelchair kind of moved on its own and raised up the ground a little bit, but not like you saw in The Exorcist. I haven't seen that. I also haven't seen solid black eyes. I've seen the eyes roll back white, but I haven't seen the solid black eyes. But by the time I make my rounds through this house, and it felt like things are jumping up on the cross, trying to pull it out of this big cross is on my shoulder, and I'm walking through the house. Things are trying to pull it down and knock it down to the ground. I'm feeling that. They want to desecrate this beautiful crucifix that I'm carrying through the house. But as I'm carrying through the house, things are also scattering. I know things are weakening and things are scattering and things are leaving. But I get back into the living room, and you could clearly see this mold retreat back across the roof, down the wall, into the major part of the mold, and then back into the wall. And when that was gone, we just knew it was all better. When I got back into the room, I don't even really know what more the nun and the rabbi saw, but they were both on their knees when I came back into the room, having made my rounds through the house. They saw something even more probably miraculous than we had all seen when the Virgin first showed up. But it all changed around at that moment. But it took all three of us being there to bring that case to closure. And the want of this girl, many times during this, the manifestation of this unclean spirit, we asked her. A lot of exorcists don't do this. I happen to like doing this. I like to call to the person that's in there. Can you still hear me? If you're still in there, we need you to fight from the inside out.
Yeah.
Fight. Um, and I think all of that as a total game plan, if one of those things hadn't happened, probably we would still be going there and visiting this girl. But it took all of that, all of the pieces to fall in place for that case to come to closure.
Wow. That's now I've experienced in different places, and I don't do many people. They used to call me like the social worker of spirits because because it always reminded me of when I worked in call centers when I was younger, and they would even when I was little on the playground, they made me the conflict mediator. Like I had to go to these weekend classes to and wear this vest on the playground to break up fights. Like so
You're
so
the
I was really
peacemaker.
good. Yeah, I was really good about that on the phone and stuff with clients. And that's what it always reminded me of when you have somebody that's gone through like 15 people and they're so angry and no one has actually listened to them of why they're angry. And it just takes and you start doing or saying something that relates to that anger and where it comes from, and then they're like, oh, okay, thank you, have a, and completely changes everything. And so I've utilize that in the same way with spirits a lot, and even a lot of negative entities. And when people witness that, they're like, this thing has attacked or um harmed or whatever everybody who has ever come to this location except for you. Why? I'm like, well, I sat down, I had a talk with them. So like there's it's just and it's probably, in those cases it's probably certain things that I've already confronted before in my life. So it makes it a little bit easier. But as far as the black mold, the insect infestations, um all of those things are indication, bugs don't just I used to work at a place. Of course, it was a bar, that had like numerous fires throughout history, numerous, people had died there of like even natural well, they think natural causes, but heart attacks and things like that. Um and there were all of a sudden roaches everywhere, and I saw this owl when we left the bar one night when we were closing, um, fly off the sign, and I was like, "Oh, nope, nope." And then a black cat was walking like teetering on the rooftop, and I was like, "Uh-uh." I said, and then after that, they had so many rats and roaches, and it didn't matter how many exterminators or what they did, they kept coming back because it's not the
Yep.
bug's fault. Like, they're automatically attracted to the negative energy. It's just like, like moths to a flame, and no different. So they can't really help it. They're just attracted to that place like a magnet because of the negative energy. And and so it's one of those things until you completely transmute that, um, it's going to keep coming back. So, and no different than, so when I see mold or things like that, I automatically think there's obviously something else. You got to get to the root of the problem. There's something else going on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I even had one time my daughter and I, when she was like 3 years old, and we toured this very old, it's called Old Prairie Town in Topeka, Kansas, and it was the original cabin that settlers made and had their, so very old. There's a church and there's a little town. There's, general store, all this stuff there. And she was standing by this very old little like baby cradle, and it had a doll in it. And all of a sudden, and this was on a tour at night, not a ghost tour. It was like a tulip festival or something. And the lady that was telling about the history of the place, she was talking, and my daughter's standing there, and she's like, "Mama, mama," and the doll's eyes flipped open. And it's one of these really old, like wooden dolls. And I was like, "Oh, it's okay," and I'm like, "Oh no." I'm like, "We gotta, gotta get out of this place." And even the tour guide, she's like, "I've worked here and given tours here for like 30 years or something." She's like, "That doll's eyes have never opened."
That's not
Of
good.
course, until my daughter's standing by it, right? So I'm like,
Yeah.
great. So then, because my daughter's like a beacon to these things too, so, so the next day, I put her down for a nap. 3 years old again. I go take a shower. I come out of the shower. She's standing at my door, like completely, almost catatonic, and she had drawn with like a Sharpie marker crosses on her hands and her feet. 3 years old. So she didn't know at that time. I mean, kids like draw scribbles and stuff, but she hadn't really been, she might have been younger than that, like 2.5, 3. She was really young. Like, she hadn't really learned the whole alphabet, how to write it yet, not especially not like a T or an X or anything. And I'm like, oh no. Like, this was before I really embraced communicating with spirits or anything like that, and we were still going to church, but I'm like, nobody would believe me even if I told, like, she's a child. That all of a sudden all kinds of stuff started happening in our house. Her toys moving, she didn't want to stay in her room. She was talking to a man who I think was friendly in her closet, but she said he had a hole in his face. He would actually warn her when something darker was coming.
Wow.
She's like, "No, my friend's telling me that." So I think it was someone who might have, ended their own life. But so he was stuck here, but he did care a lot about her to protect her, try to warn her for some things. And I remember I put her to bed one night. I went in my bathroom and something was dripping, kind of like you said, like coming from the seams in the ceiling. And this was an apartment complex, and so it was fairly new. It wasn't like it was old with cracks or anything, but um, it looked like blood, and then there were like handprints started down the wall from the blood, and I'm like, okay, I'm losing my ever loving mind here. Like this isn't happening. Like what is going on? And all this, she had a baby gate to her door in her room, and she was staying there screaming, "Mama, Mama, it's coming!" And I picked her up, and I was running with her. She stops me because I thought something was behind me. I go to turn in my living room. She turns, grabs my hand, or grabs my face with her hands, and she says, "Mama, don't you dare look at it!" Like in the most serious. And she's 3, very
Wow.
young, like. So she didn't want me to look at whatever was behind me, obviously. Um, which makes sense now with what I know know about demons. Um, After that night, and I didn't think much of it until my next kind of spiritual awakening a few years later after I died again. I went back on my camera roll. That night, I had taken a picture. She had scribbled on the wall with that same permanent marker behind a chair. I caught her, she's looking over, and it was when she was still acting very, very odd. She had written, this was after I died, granted, again, it was Aramaic on the wall. She wrote in Aramaic at 3 years old in that permanent marker. I took a picture of it. The picture I took was at 3:33 in the morning on the last day of Lent. And I'm like,
Wow.
you know, I don't know anything I about at that time. I didn't know that much about the Catholic faith. I didn't know that much about. And I was like, there was a movie I watched a long time ago, Stigmata. I was like, I need to go. Maybe there's like a message in that movie to watch, because again, I didn't know anything about anything at the time. And I still don't. Like every day, I realize how much I don't know. But I, I went back and I watched that, and I was like, that's something she had talked at that age. If something can possess. Oh, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
See, my screen completely froze when I was trying
Oh,
to.
really?
Of course. um but at that age, if a child is that vulnerable, then it's something that we should be teaching them. And so years later, fast forward back to Atchison and me where we are now. um it was 2 years ago now that I went to the Sally house, and I wrote in the basement there. I had never studied Solomon or the Seal of Solomon or anything to that nature, but right before I went there, I had received the Seal of Solomon, a necklace in the mail, and I wore it. Um, Not even knowing what it stood for, what it meant. I know I don't recommend you all do things without knowing what they stand for mean. But in the basement there, I started spelling out. There were some blocks in the floor, and everybody else was afraid of the basement. And I'm like, I didn't feel bad energy there. It wasn't affecting me. Um, but I wrote in these blocks. I thought it was spelling out Malachi, but that's not what it spelled. It spelled something else, and said sacrificing the children. And I was like, ooh, that's interesting. It wasn't even a month later, somebody online from Atchison, some Atchison group, posted a picture of a house, and in the house's concrete, literally in the foundation of the house, was the name Trisha. And I was like, That's interesting. So when I went there, that house is right in front of the orphanage cemetery. And I was like, oh, that makes sense, sacrificing, because a lot of the during the Civil War, a lot of the orphans were sent to Atchison, Kansas, and St. Joseph, and so from all of that is what what led me on this entire I guess journey of oh, it was after my daughter experienced that when she was 3, though, that I I started going to school for my metaphysical degree, studying different religions, theology, and if I keep telling people, if I just have to finish my dissertation. And I know it's one of those things, it's like a fear, like if I actually finish it, I joke about it to people. I'm like, yeah, I would actually, I could have the title of a doctor and a reverend. And so now it's interesting that you're on my show because um, my school shut down, obviously, during COVID and everything. So I kind of, put that on the back burner, and I haven't really, like, I knew it was something I was supposed to do back then, but I just need to finish it. And I haven't yet. So maybe that's a sign that I need to
You
need
will.
to
You'll
do
finish
something
it.
about that.
You'll finish it. I have faith in you.
It's school's hard when I'm 42,
My
so
gosh, I'm telling you, it's like I feel that's all. That's why I had to cut back. I used to do every Monday and Friday on my show, but I cut back to just 2 Mondays a month. Yeah, 2 Mondays a month, and then I try to do every Friday, but there's many Fridays where I have to have the producer just play a best of because I'm cramming to get a paper done or I got a test
right.
coming up, and but it's 24/7. Uh, yeah, I'm studying, reading, doing quizzes, submitting papers, and then I sleep, and then I wake up and I do it all again until I got to go to sleep again. So there's a couple of breaks there where I have lunch or dinner with the wife and we talk a little bit here and there, but it's yeah, you'll get it done. But yeah, it's very important. I'm sensing that it's a very important thing that you need to finish, and so maybe that is why we're having this talk tonight. But you'll do it. Just do it.
I know. Man, it's and it was something it was after I initially diagnosed with Lyme disease and healed that I actually started that journey, and that I actually went back to school. So so now that it's been, oh gosh, 4 years since I started that, it's coming. It's coming. It keeps coming back up. Random people keep bringing me these messages that I need to finish it. So, well, Shawn, it has been a pleasure. I can't believe it's already been 2 hours. And um, tell everyone where they can find you on your podcast, on your show, and then of course on Eli Roth Presents Legion of Exorcists as well.
Well, Eli Roth Presents the Legion of Exorcists is streaming now on Discovery Plus and Max. How long it'll be streaming there, I'm not sure. I think they stream once they go there. They stream forever if you pay to be have Max or Discovery Plus. I think it's always there. You can also go to Amazon Prime Video and buy the complete season one, like
Oh
10 bucks,
wow.
I think, for the complete season, or like $1.99 per episode. You can even buy the episodes. Um, my show, Reverend Shawn Whittington's Paranormal Ministry Live, is the second Monday of every month, the last Monday of every month, and every Friday. Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific and Fridays at 2 p.m. Pacific. That's Facebook Live, and then the archive goes uploaded to my YouTube channel, Reverend Shawn Whittington, at midnight on both those nights. The website, ghostbegone.biz. There
It's
you'll
down at the
find
bottom.
both my books.
It's way down at the bottom.
And I also teach an online class. You can enroll in there in spiritual warfare. I'm also a certified spiritual advisor. So if you're having issues of a spiritual nature not attached to the paranormal and you want to make an appointment to speak with me, there's a place on the website where you can do that. otherwise than that, I'm just a hard-working, hard-studying seminarian, and yeah, that's it. That's my story.
He has some amazing guests on his show as well. They're really interesting. So be sure to check that out. And oh, speaking of I've been telling my listeners forever that I'm going to finish a website too and get it, I combined all my all my all my stuff into one place instead of having multiple links. You can now, the website's not completely live, I know, but you can go to YouTube or Facebook now to Lenora Lore. I probably have 0 subscribers or likes or anything because I literally just got that done this week, but I do almost have the website finished as well. And y- I'm a perfectionist and have OCD, so I keep redoing everything. Um, but that's going to have a lot of, I will absolutely have a lot of the recipes I use for mindful living and nutrition things in my own life, and for chakras and stuff like that, as well as I've been writing. I know it's crazy. I've been writing every day of my different adventures in my life that have all of these little messages and stuff that people will probably get a kick out of. So
Very
that's
cool.
finally, I've been telling everybody I've been working on that for like the last year. So
Good, good for you.
it's
That's gonna be awesome when you're done.
finally, finally coming through. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening. We do have a few more advertisements for the podcast awards for the station. Be sure to check those out, and join us again next time. Thank you all for listening. Be safe. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time.